My name's Jenna Velez, and I'm the Vice President of External Affairs at the Mental Health Association of Westchester, and really excited to be hosting this part 2 of our men's mental health community conversation. We had part 1 back in March and realized rather quickly that evening that we didn't have near enough time to do justice to the conversation, and we knew that we wanted to follow up with a part 2. And so really wanted to be thoughtful too about what were some of the issues that maybe we didn't get to dive as deep into in the first part. And one of those was around issues of religion and spirituality and other cultural factors. So we really wanted to gather a panel of individuals who could really speak to those issues, as well as continue the conversation specific to men and mental health. And so we are pleased to have a panel that's joined us tonight. I'm going to just tell you, be very transparent right now. We're having difficulty finding one of our panelists, and we're hoping that he is going to join us any minute. So we're trying to find out what is happening there and to troubleshoot how to get him in here. But we're gonna soldier forward, and we will be fine either way. Okay. Let me just move forward here. So I just wanted to, for anybody who's not familiar with MHA, let you know that the mission of MHA, we're a nonprofit, and our mission is really to promote mental health through advocacy, community education, and direct services. And we provide a lot of direct services, but we also try to really get out into the community and educate people about mental health and mental health issues that are relevant to our community to help people, overcome stigma and just make sure that people have that relevant information and are able to really just facilitate conversations around mental health and normalize those kind of conversations. And so I wanted to provide some of the resources that mental health, that MHA provides. So we have, if you're interested in services and clinic referrals, I wanted to provide that information for you, but also just let you know that we have this community connection line, which is available Monday through Friday and about 9 to 5. And really, it's just a line for anybody who's looking for a friendly conversation. We recognize during COVID that sometimes, you don't necessarily need therapy or there's not a crisis going on, but maybe you just have been a little bit isolated and need someone to talk to. So that line is intended just to offer a friendly conversation for anybody who needs that. So a couple of housekeeping things. We just ask that you keep yourself muted during the presentation, but we do encourage participation. So if you have questions, pop those into the chat and we'll make sure that we get to as many of those as we can. Also, if you have a comment to make there or want to direct something specifically to one of our panelists, that's fine also. And just a helpful hint is if you choose speaker view, so if you go to the top right of your Zoom screen and you see view, if you choose speaker view, you'll be able to see, it can be a little bit less distracting sometimes, so you always see who is speaking on the screen. So I am going to go ahead and introduce our panelists to you. So we have Rabbi Alfredo Bordowski with us and Ramon Reshef. And right now we're trying to locate Reverend Challenger. We're hoping that he's going to join us this evening. But if he does, he's going to jump right in. But Rabbi Alfredo and Ramon are really going to start this conversation for us. So I do also want to say that part of the reason why we are doing this tonight is because we know that men are less likely than women to seek help for mental health issues like depression, substance use, and even just to open up and talk about stressful life events. But we also know that men are more likely to die by suicide. And so there's a real gap there. If they're less likely to seek help, but more likely to die by suicide, then we really need to close that gap a little bit. And one of the ways that we think we can do that is just by having conversations like we're having tonight. So with that, I want to toss it over to Rabbi Alfredo, if you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about why this conversation is really important to you, and then we'll move to Ramon. And you're on mute. Rabbi Alfredo, you are muted.
Okay, here we go. Then, thank you, Jenna. And hello to everybody. I was saying to ask a rabbi to introduce himself is dangerous because it may become a sermon. But I will be brief. I grew up in Argentina. I am a trained theologian. And later on, I became a social worker. And I founded a congregation called Sulam Jacob here in Larchmont. And at the personal level, I have bipolar, and I've been struggling with it for most of my life. And then I am giving, talking from a professional point of view, but I am talking also from a very personal and experiential position.
Thank you for that introduction. And Ramon?
Thank you, Jenna. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Ramon. I am a longtime New Yorker. I'm currently, for the last 17 or 18 months, in Colorado. And the reason I'm here is because I am a very strong proponent of men's work, and men's work meaning either one-on-one coaching or group sessions. And the way that I was kind of introduced to men's work is via a personal need. I've been a firefighter for 29 or so years. And as COVID hit, I was living 4 miles from New Rochelle. New Rochelle is where the first hotspot of COVID in New York was. And I found myself in the very unenviable position of having to make a determination. I had 2 people in my household that were immunodeficient, and I could not, in good conscience, go out and be a firefighter, endanger my family. So I had a conversation with my captain at the time, and I told him I'm just not able to respond. And while he and everyone in the firehouse were very, very open and very receiving of that, the shame that I felt and the self-loathing that I felt in the inability to respond, as I've been doing for so many years, hit me so hard that I just did not know what to do. And one of the things that made it palatable and really got me into the men's work is an organization called Everyman, which I joined. And through being with men and communicating and having community, I noted that how important and how powerful this forum is, and I decided that this really is my calling. This is something that I want to forward and carry the message to everyone who is willing to listen. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much. And I see that we have Reverend Challenger now. You came under a different name and fooled us. But we're so glad to have you. And we're just actually doing introductions. So if you want to just introduce yourself and why this conversation about men's mental health is important to you. We just have to unmute you.
Yeah, better. All right.
There we go.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I was hitting a whole nother site and it wasn't letting me in. And so I was like, okay, thank God for Pat White, because she sent out a reminder. So I went on that, hit that, and here I am. Well,
We're glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here. I'm Reverend Challenger Jr. I have the distinct honor to be the pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church located here in White Plains, New York. I am also an ongoing, growing friend of Rabbi Alfredo. He likes me and I like him too. And so I'm also the president of the Ministers Fellowship Council for the City of White Plains and vicinity. And I wear lots and lots and lots of hats. And so let me just do it this way real quick. So on last night here in my office, I had a young couple that came to me, and the two young people had just had their child taken away from them that was only a month old. And the young girl has gone through foster care herself. The young man has been dealing with alcoholism, marijuana, and not being steady on his meds. As I began to talk to both of them, I understood that there was mental health issues that needed to be addressed. The young lady has been off her meds for a long time, and the young man has been on and off with his meds. So what has that got to do with tonight? It is important that persons like myself, clergy, and others that can recognize the signs of mental health and then to point people in the right direction. Sometimes, Rabbi Alfredo, I'm very nice and I'm very nice. And then there's times I have to be like the old grandma switch and just use it in order to push people to where they really need to go. And so for me, mental health, especially within the African American community, and as you'll find tonight, I'll be very candid, has not been addressed, and nor have we want to address it. Mental health is not something that we talk about. Mental health is not something that we deal with in the past of the African American community. We just put the people in a room and call it a day. But because of the outgrowth of what we're seeing with mental health, we know even in the Baptist Association that I'm a part of, we first started dealing with the mental health of the clergy. We found that pre-COVID, that at least 17 African-American clergy of all different types of denominations were killing themselves. One pastor, young man, sent his wife and his child to church. Before him, he went into the garage, took the thing and just killed himself from the fumes. Another pastor found out that he had terminal cancer, called for a Christmas service the week before Christmas, had the service, and then killed himself as well. Stress-related situations within the clergy, and if it's in the clergy, what's happening in the pew. So I'm here to talk, I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn, and I'm grateful, grateful that we'll be able to talk, hear one another's perspective, and also understand that we're really not in silos, we're all in this together. And so the other part that our church uses, that not only are we all in this together, but we're not going to leave no one behind. So that's why I'm here, and I hope I can add something to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you already have. So, and I appreciate the fact that you are planning to speak candidly, because that's what we're here to do also. So that's great. So I mean, I'd like to start with, we talked a little bit about the fact that, men seek help at lower rates for mental health issues than women do, but they die by suicide more frequently. And so I'd like to hear from you, from each of your perspectives, on some of the reasons why you think that might be.
Why we don't seek help?
I volunteer to answer. And let me tell you, my interest is on spirituality and mental health. And I want to refer to a book written by Ernst, the name, The Denial of Death, Ernst Becker. The Denial of 1973, he obtained the Pulitzer Prize for the book. It's a seminal book, and he writes about what is the most important existential question of a person. And he said the most important question is death. And the spiritual journey is about dealing with the finite condition of a person. And he says that every person, in order to solve the issue of death, is going to attach himself, in this case, to something that is everlasting. And by attaching to that everlasting, whatever, then we sublimate and we conquer the fear of death. Then a society must ask, what have we chosen to attach ourselves to conquer the fear of death? For centuries was God. But that's not the case for modernity. And I would say to you that in our society, the American man has attached himself in search of meaning, transcendence, and conquering death to things like athletes, professional athletes, okay? Or Hollywood. And by the way, I am all for it. I am for sports, I am for Hollywood, I love it. But what we've done, if we had taken something relative and made it, we have attached ourselves to it to placate our fears. Why is this important for mental health? Because those kind of heroes we have made are based on power, skills, winning, overcoming, never failing, being important and adored. And when you attach yourself culturally and spiritually to that kind of dynamics, to go for help, to admit that you need help, to admit that you have failed, is forbidden.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's like that.
Then culture, we have created a culture for men that prevents them from seeking help.
Thank you. Ramon, Reverend, do you want to add to that?
Sure, I'll jump in. I think Rabbi, thank you. That was actually quite enlightening. From the perspective of what I've been exposed to in men's work and speaking to many men, as we have these groups and we talk very openly and honestly about what's true in our lives, the overwhelming prevalence is that society does not allow men to be weak. Society does not allow men to be emotional. And the societal constructs are such that if you're not the tough, strong man that doesn't cry, doesn't have emotions, doesn't have good communicative skills, then you're just, you're just not a man. And what's really sad is that many men are told this from a very young age. I was one. And to break that apart and to actually come to a place where I understand that the more I communicate, the more emotion I show and have, the better my relationships are. So I think there's a real powerful societal construct that just prevents us as men from seeking help, from seeking community, And that's why there's a huge, it's a sickness.
I'm gonna join in with my two brothers and totally agree. And that is our growing up, especially I'm gonna say in the 60s and the 70s, no way could we be weak. No way. You were a sissy, you were a punk, you know, and just being ostracized was not something that you wanted to be. And so we were raised, boys don't cry. We were raised, suck it up, you know. We were raised in all kinds of stereotypes. And that's funny that the majority of our fathers and uncles did not even live up to as well, because they hid them behind alcoholism or something else. And so we don't seek it because we don't want the label of weak. We don't seek it because we don't want the label of being cast aside. I never forget when I became ordained for the first time, my stepfather cried, and I just looked at him like he was crazy. Like, why is there tears coming out of this man's eyes? My mother should be crying. Why are you crying? And in the midst of that sacred ceremony, my masculinity upbringing kicked in, and I was like, why are you crying? I don't get it. Okay. Now, take it for me now. I took on my father's spirit, and I cry for anything. Now, it could be Lucy, you know, TikTok is really crazy for me because I just boo-hoo, you know, at the most simplest things, especially when the soldier comes home and the child doesn't know it. I just boo-hoo and just start crying. But I say that that's my strength of my masculinity. I'm in touch with it. But when we were growing up, not at all. Not at all. I say this, and then I'll give it back to you. I have a son, a foster son that's doing life in prison. And I went to see him at a maximum security prison in Pennsylvania. And he had no idea I was coming. And so he thought it was his child's mother, maybe his girlfriend. And so he was prepared for that. And when he came through the door and he saw it was me, his eyes just swelled up, and everything of my North Carolinian upbringing went up to him and said, you better not cry. Let me cry, because the other inmates were around. And I dared not allow him to show, you know, his emotions at the time, which was a jackass thing to do. But I know better now. But we're told to make sure that boys don't cry. We're told to make sure our sons don't cry, you know? So in that moment, when we saw each other, I wanted him to still hold on to his masculinity. Those people didn't know me, so I can cry. But that's crazy, because that's all that stuff that I was brought up on.
Yeah, all really powerful and insightful answers. And I like how each of them also came from a place not just of knowledge and awareness, but from your own experiences as well, and what you learned through your own experiences. So I guess I want to then shift and ask that question a little bit differently. It's like, okay, we know this stuff. So then how do we start to overcome some of these messages that we know are part of the problem? And in your work that you do, whether it's with your congregation or whether it's in the groups that you're running, Ramon, like, what are some of the ways that you've utilized and relied on to start to shift that messaging?
I think the probably the most direct and most powerful answer is one person at a time. And when, especially in the small groups, when we sit and there are sometimes 8, sometimes 12 men, and there are prompts. We use prompts to initiate conversation around emotions, around things that come up on a regular basis, whether it be in the family, in the home, with the kids, or at work, or what are some situations that come up that affect you in a certain way. So one of the tools that I use in my coaching practice is kind of a somatic connection. So whatever comes up in the body many times is a very clear indication of what the emotions are. So even if you don't have the words, if you pay attention to the body, and the body kind of informs you that there are emotions, something is going on. And the more you have a dialogue with your body, the more you're familiar with the body, the better it is that one can understand what those emotions are. And once you start naming them, then you can start verbalizing them. And then it's a matter of just kind of looking into things that just don't serve. So these emotions are telling me something. These emotions are informing me of a behavior. So if it's anger, why am I, what is this anger? What is this anger telling me? Is it something that's going on right now? Is it something that's coming up from my past? So there are a lot of ways of utilizing these various tools to open up conversations and to make people more aware. And it's like a snowball. Once it starts, it accumulates, and it grows larger and larger, and men are just more able to and more capable to address emotions and have conversation around it. So you really do it one person at a time.
I mean, it's truly fascinating, right? Because this is the kind of stuff that we try to teach to children these days, right? And I mean, you're teaching this now to men because they weren't taught how to do that.
Yeah.
And, so it really is, it's like learning a skill that just was never there.
Yeah,
So,
and what you're saying about teaching men now is 100% true. And what happens with a lot of these men are fathers. And they take it home, and there's this whole different languaging with their kids, whether it be their boys or their girls, and that's it. It really it's kind of like a grassroots movement.
Yeah, really fascinating. And I imagine that the men who are coming to you are already at a place of like wanting to do this, right? Because otherwise, how would they wouldn't be coming to your group. So you're starting from that place. But I imagine for you, Rabbi, and for you, Reverend, that you're oftentimes in situations where perhaps the person is not even at that place yet of wanting to connect with their emotions. And you may be seeing things like you talked about before, you're seeing signs or things like that. So how do you tailor those conversations based on who you're speaking to try and open up and get to people's emotions and give them that permission to do it?
I think for me, it's an individual presentation is really who the person is. If the person that I'm talking to is a person that is like a son to me, a mentor to me, I can dig in a little bit more and really tap into him. If it's a grown man and it's longer, it's really longer, because there's going to be resistance, because he has so much to if he shows weakness, that along comes weakness, comes shame. And this is one thing that man don't want to be. He don't want to be shamed, especially in front of another man. So back in the good old days when I was working with HIV and AIDS, we have to create a very safe community or a safe environment for them to open themselves up to. And so once they feel that they are in a safe environment, it becomes great. Many years ago, I can't remember how many years ago, but I was at a TD Jakes Manpower conference, and the two last speakers, the three last speakers, one was a former mayor. They got caught up and some stuff and had to do some prison time. Another one was a great gospel singer, and another one was a pastor, a minister. But each one of them said the same thing. They found a safe place to fall. And when they found that safe place to fall, they were able to get the help that they need. And so, once again, it all depends on who I'm talking to, but if it's going to be a grown man, it's going to take some time to create that safe place for him to fall, and he's all right because he knows he's safe. And I think, period, I think men want to feel that they're safe. Rabbi?
Jenna, I want to refer to your first question about what can we do. And again, from a spiritual perspective, I spent many, many hours last year reading academic papers on spirituality and mental health. I may have read over 100 of them. The Royal Academy of Psychiatry in Britain is doing leading research. Actually, the state of California has invested a lot of resources on the specific issue of spirituality and mental health. And one thing I learned from reading so many studies is that, for example, there is tremendous evidence that prayer helps with depression. Direct evidence that people who pray, their depression diminishes. Not only that, I have read many studies that analyze which kind of prayer is effective. Not all prayers are equal. There are some prayers that help mental health and prayers that do not. What I can say also with certainty, with the exception of Reverend Challenger, I don't know any church, I don't know any synagogue, I don't know any mosque who is aware of the last 20 years of research on the impact of prayer and spirituality on mental health. Which kind of prayer? And we have a crisis of short circuit and disconnect between science and religion. We are back to the Middle Ages when it comes to the issue of what we know today about the science of spirituality and mental health and what is going on the field at congregations. And I am convinced that until that bridge is not built and the religious community does not create a service and a prayer that responds to the knowledge we have that men and women and everybody else will not benefit fully of the gift we have in front of us.
I just want to say this as well. I agree with the rabbi, and thank you for that shout out. But he's very right. My whole life was centered around my father's ministry that talked and taught prayer. And if there is a main emphasis in the house that I am the leader of, it's prayer. We pray.
And I not only I know that, I admire, and I tell you even more as a Jew, and this is being recorded. As a Jew, I know that you pray better than me, because we, the Jewish people, we are all about the brain, okay, and very little about prayer. But there are different prayers on the study, by the way. For example, the study shows, most of the studies show that the most effective prayer for mental health is one-on-one. That an hour or half an hour of prayer one-on-one with a minister or somebody else has a significant impact on the mental health of individual. And I am talking about the Royal Academy of Psychiatry, okay? I'm talking about Harvard University. Studies by the best and brightest. The best and brightest. But Reverend, I'm going to show up at your place once, okay? Unannounced, okay? just to enjoy your prayer.
Well, I think there's a lot. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was just
No,
gonna say, I mean,
I was going to say, come, Rabbi. We just had, I forgot to tell you, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I spoke at Temple Center, Israel. This Baptist boy speaking in the largest Jewish synagogue in White Plains. So two rabbis came on Sunday to check us out. So join us.
By the way, Jenna, there is something on the chat that somebody mentioned.
No, I was just going to say, and you know what, Ben, that's such a great question. And it actually is like right where I wanted to go. So thank you for queuing that up, because I think we do have so much evidence of how helpful a community of, like a church community and spirituality and faith and all these things. Like there's so much benefit to a person in their, in their mental health. It can be so helpful. But it's a double-edged sword, right? Because there have also been some really hurtful, harmful messages that people have received from churches. And so, as church leaders here, who are really passionate about this and wanting to make sure that people prioritize their mental health. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that as well, and how you're doing that.
Are you asking me?
Either whoever wants to jump in and answer, that's fine.
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rabbi. I'm reading the comments.
I was doing that too.
Oh, yeah, and I think that Ben was speaking to this issue, right? Like there are times where sometimes, someone may go to a spiritual community or a church and talk about the fact that they're depressed and maybe receive a message that is not so helpful and still sort of be in that position of like someone else, well, you have to work this out on your own. This is like a lack of faith or something like that. And how do you overcome those messages that can add to the stigma that a man might feel even opening up about that?
Well, as a religious leader, I tell you that the verdict on religion vis-a-vis the history of humanity is not settled yet. And there are very good arguments for the goodness of religion and very good arguments with all the disasters that religion has brought to the world. In some way, I became a rabbi, by the way. One of the reasons, because my rabbi was an activist during the military dictatorship in Argentina. And he stood to the military at the risk of his life. And I marched with him. And he talked, the word of the prophets. Jeremiah, that were his heroes. And then I grew up on that tradition of religion as an agent of goodness in the world. Then I read the question and I share your concern. And in the studies I read that I mentioned before, basically each one of them has a section on the negative impact of religion. They're very honest studies and they present data. Clearly happens in fundamentalist expressions of religion, okay, which are bad for everything, not for mental health, are just bad. Then clearly religion works well, spirituality for mental health in non-fundamentalist, open-minded. And I want to say one more thing. Look at God in the Hebrew Bible. God needs to go to clinic. Okay? I mean, he gets tantrums all over, he loses it, he destroys things. I mean, he wants to kill you 1 minute and he wants to love you the next minute. God is more bipolar than I am. And why is that important? Because we can talk about a God people can relate to. Because what is good about God is that God overcame the difficulties. The God that we need to talk is not a God about perfection, because the God of the Bible is not perfect by any means. What is good about God is that we look at God and we can say, my struggle is not a defect on me. My struggle is a reflection of the divine.
Yes.
And on that level, I trust religion. At that level, I trust religion. When we enter that kind of religion, I can say is good for the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Reverend, will
Yeah.
you also speak specifically maybe to the Black church as well? Because I know you talked about that a little bit in the beginning, and maybe some of the unique issues that come up there as well for Black men and specifically.
So interesting. I used to be in charge of a group home, older boys group home here in the city of White Plains. And the managers didn't really think things out. And so the powers that be. So our psychologist that came in once a month was an Indian woman, a woman from India. And she was supposed to have, clinical, with these boys. And so the boys understood the only thing they had to do was talk about sex and the whole thing was over. She would just close it, get out, and because they knew how to push her button. So one day she came to me and she said to me, Mr. Challenger, no offense, but why are Black people so resistant to psychologists and therapy and stuff like that? I said, because we go to church. We go to church. So all of our emotions, all of what we feel, we let it out in church. So that enthusiastic worship that we have, the clapping, the dancing, are also are means that we release all this stuff that we come through the door. I say, come to the altar so that when you leave the altar, you will be altered. So I play on the words, okay? And we literally, whatever we're praying about, like in COVID, we had challenges because we can't come to the altar no more. We have to stand in our seats and stuff like that. But within the Black church, and I'm saying it again, within the Black church, mental illness is coming up and it's no longer a taboo. Okay. And because it's not a taboo, we now can say this person needs to get mental health. We now can say, we have a person in our church that's dealing with some mental stuff. So we have a clinician that's a part of Soul Shop that we do. So I contacted her. So the member and the nephew are seeing her. Maybe, because I'm not good with this, because I consider myself a liberation theologist minister like Dr. King. So maybe the average Black pastor would not talk about mental health. They would talk about pastoral help and stuff like that. But there's only so much that we can do. A person asked the question, how can you be born again or spirit renewed and still be depressed? Because Rabbi said it, the fundamentalists and the orthodoxy of any religion makes you think that when you go in, everything is taken care of. Not true. We have to grow and we have to mature. in the New Testament, you're talking about bipolar, Rabbi. We've got Peter, who's like right up there next to Jesus, Jesus' main person. Even when they came to arrest him, Peter pulls out a sword, cuts the person's ear off, and so that's violent, right? That's a violent tendency. A few hours later, they say, "You're one of his disciples." He says, "I don't know him." Wait, you've been walking with him for 3 years, all right? I don't know him. I don't know him. Then he cusses the woman out, literally cusses the woman out. And then later he strolls to the tomb hoping, and before he gets there, somebody else done told him that Jesus is risen from the dead. And Peter goes through a whole challenge about who he is. So there are times in which in a person's life, even in their spirituality, this is what I say, there are times of I call it drama, trauma, and trouble. But during those times of trauma, drama, and trouble, there's also growth going on. What am I learning from this? What am I expected to learn from this? And I'm not going to allow this part to keep me down. So going back to the main premise, the Black church is just now embracing. Rabbi, I hope you can find it, but there is a denomination, the African American, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, and they have a whole book for their particular denomination that deals with mental health.
Wow.
For some strange reason, they invited me on a panel, and they pulled that book out, and I was like, we ain't got one of them. And the book dealt with all of the things that as African Americans that we need to deal with, either diet or, as we say, generational tendencies and traits or curses. And it talks about how to eliminate. So once again, the Black church is coming into a place where we are recognizing that we need to do more than just dance and shout and yell. We now need some clinical help to help us to work this stuff out.
That's so great and encouraging to hear too about addressing that generational trauma. And it makes me think of what Ramon was talking about as well, and the work of how it sort of gets passed down as well, because there's all kinds of generational traumas and racial trauma that have been experienced. And how does that influence and impact then how you interact with the generations that you're bringing up? And so the more that we open up these conversations and start to undo some of that and create different pathways, the better we're doing for our future generations.
Yeah, that's for sure. One thing I wanted to kind of tag along on the mental health issue is that I think in my experience, neither the church nor the synagogue nor men's groups are the proper, they're not the be all and end all. So one of the things we say in men's work is this is not therapy. It's therapeutic, but it's not therapy. So this is something, therapy is something that needs to be done in addition. So certainly the prayer and going to church and going to synagogue and being a part of men's work, et cetera, is very beneficial and will open up many, many doors. However, it's not the clinical aspect, which is also necessary.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that gets to the root of some of the stigma as well, that of mental health versus, right, because we wouldn't expect the same thing for somebody who is experiencing a medical issue, that it would be the be all end all also. And there's also evidence to support that prayer and spirituality can be actually, and faith can be really helpful in recovery from medical issues also, right? But we're not suggesting that people say, you only address it that way. We can recognize that it's helpful and all that. So yeah, thank you for saying that, because I think it also gets to the root of some of the stigma that there is with mental health. So we have about 9 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we, I know we probably have, I feel like every time we do this, it's like we could go on and on and on and on. So I'm also just wondering if we could talk about like the differences in how maybe in your, and again, I'm kind of going back to the congregations because I know you're interacting with more than just men, but I know that oftentimes like a pastor of a church or someone is, your congregants may come to you with issues. And I'm wondering if you notice differences in how men versus women may present to you any kind of emotional issue that they may be dealing with.
In my case, the main difference is that women, and is it, you know, is in certain way, it would be better if I were a female rabbi. And that's why in large congregations, it's always a good idea to have a male and female rabbi and other preferences, if possible. But when they come to me, the difference is that women come to me to talk about the problem. For men, they come to talk to me about anything else until at some point, I know that I need to wait, I have to be patient and skillful. At some point, the problem comes. Then there is, for the men, there is a longer process. There is a lot of talking about a lot of things. And then there is hopefully an openness. Then the women, Rabbi, I need to talk to you, with you about, you know, an issue I have. They're more direct, less shy about their feelings, but I tell you one more thing. It's a longer process with the men, but when they open up, it's a deep well of feelings, bottled there, that come up with a force of a geyser, which in women, there are more expressions maybe of the feelings, but in men, they are more overwhelmed by the manifestation of the feelings.
Maybe because they haven't been able to let it out before
Right.
that. Yeah.
For me, a woman will come and be more emotional, and the tears will come 5 minutes, if that. And so even how I position myself, I'm sitting behind this nice wooden desk, and so when I see that it's getting there, I move myself to get closer to them and to express my empathy and my sympathy and what they are dealing with and stuff like that. And hopefully I have an answer, or hopefully I can point them to somebody that may have the answer for them. I'm doing this whole series about husbands and wives right now, and one of our apostles of the church has some very strong language in regards to the makeup of the family, and so I am deconstructing what would be the norm of how this would be done, because some women have been subjugated to be as a piece of product or material, and then some men have been taught that they are the boss and nobody else can tell them what to do. So I have to break all that down, get rid of it, and then move in. When a man comes to the office, it will definitely take him a minute, and hopefully, or he'll avoid it altogether and think that, and just act like there's nothing wrong. And so it's and then this is where Ramon's men's group comes in. And I'm gonna be honest, that's where the most work occurs for most Black churches, if they have a men's group, that's where the therapy, that's where the counseling occurs. It really never really occurs in the office. It, 5 or 6 brothers, and they all agree, yeah, me too, yeah. And all of a sudden, they feel just as comfortable to tell all their business, and it's cool because now, once again, they go that safe place. But yeah, the majority of men's counseling emotions, it's never done in my office. It's always done with a group of men. Rabbi, you know this text in Proverbs where it says, where there's a multitude of counselors, there is safety. And that's what happens when a multitude of men come together, they feel safe. And by the time they get finished talking to one another, Ramon, I think I'm saying it right. When they get finished talking to one another, man, they be slapping one another on the back, high five, walking out. And wife, look out, because you're gonna get a brand new husband when you walk out the door. I mean, that's what happens.
Yeah,
That's
no,
what
I think that's 100% true. I mean, just in my observations and my time in men's group and men's work and coaching, it's the depth of the emotions that exist is so vast, and having this community, this safety, Reverend, as you keep saying, which is so true. This community of men that are all there together, and we're all talking, and we're all emoting, and there's a beauty to it, and there's a community, and there's a bond. So it's a really beautiful place to not only do therapeutic work, but also form a community of men like you, like me. So there's a lot to it.
And
I
Gina,
love
what's
that.
crazy,
So like what's emerging is that safety is created through connection.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And Gina, what I'm about to say is, what is really crazy about this, it's not a Black issue. It's not a white man's issue. It ain't a Spanish man issue. We become total men, and color and age don't matter.
It's true.
I mean, we forget all our differences,
It's true.
and bang, boom.
Yeah,
We're in
there's
there.
something shared to connect around.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really, this is really powerful. And I hope that, for anybody who is listening, who maybe feels that drive or that need to connect with other men, will look for an opportunity to do that. And, even potentially reach out to us and say, I need that connection. And we can help make that, whether it's at, your local, faith community, or a men's group, or, just some friends that you have. I mean, be the first one, right, to open that door, because what I'm hearing is that it's not unique to just individuals who are, with a mental health condition. This is, men need a place to put their emotions as well.
Absolutely. And I'm very happy to be a resource for that, Jenna. And I also know that I was speaking with Jamie from Meritage, and we're actually considering putting together a group. So there are a lot of resources available. There are a lot of things that are open and available.
Yeah, exactly. And the more we talk about it, and the more, I shouldn't say we, I mean, women, we're open books all the time, right? But for the most part, but when you come and you share your own experiences, and you open those doors and those conversations for other men, you're doing really powerful, transformative work. And I can't thank you enough for coming and doing that here tonight. We did have one, I know we're a little bit over time, but Vernon had a question, and I want to make sure we get to that question. But he was asking, do you think that the reluctance of Black males to seek help for mental health issues is less now than what was years ago? You're shaking your head.
Yes. Black men today will go get some help. And I think a lot of it is because some men have already gotten help in rehabs, either or court ordered mental health issues. And so it has tapped into other people that will say, you need to go get some help. you need to, and there's nothing wrong with it now. Vernon, you know, back in the day, what? Get some help. Go get a bottle.
Mm.
Go get some bottle. Go get liquor. That's all the help you need, you know.
Mhm.
But now we recognize the bottle's only a temporary fix, you know. But when you really need some help, you know, I'll find some. I just wanted to say this real quick before we leave, about maybe my second year here at Calvary, second or third year, I had this fantastic idea of 100 men worshiping together. And so it was like, where do you get 100 men from? You know, 100 men in a church, that's impossible. Well, once again, color didn't matter, denomination didn't matter. We end up with Episcopals and United Methodist pastors that were with us on that day. And literally, Ramon, literally, the songs that how we used to sing them as comfort zones for women to sing, we literally had to bring, Vernon, we had to bring every octave down, because all of a sudden you heard pure baritone and bass in the church. My church considered about like 300, but you heard 100 and about 30 men singing, and it was like, oh my God. And the idea, it worked for 2 years. And then, you know, once we get used to the game, we want something else. You know, that's how men go, you know, next, you know. But for the first 2 years, 100 men gathered together, and it was just so powerful. And whenever men come together, that's why football is so important to men. And, you know, basketball is so important to men because it's male bonding. I think Ramon will agree with me. Why do we take our kids to basketball games and football games? Why does daddy do that and grandpa do that? It's male bonding, you know. It's like, you know, this is what you're going to be doing. You may break your nose, but you're going to do this, you know. But you know, it's powerful. It's powerful. And so I just wanted to share that, because when men come together, there's a whole different environment. Everything literally shifts. And what's crazy is sometimes when the ladies see all this, they literally step aside and become observers and like, what is going on? My first year rabbi here, my first year, I came in November. Christmas was right there, and I had an idea that I needed to get to know the congregation. We had 75, the women of our church didn't even know we had 75 men. We had 75 men to march down the aisle and sing Christmas hymns. The whole place just went, what? Because once again, the atmosphere changes when men step up.
Yeah, when you give them that permission and say it's okay to do this and it's encouraged to do this, and you know, so that there's not that message saying that it's not. Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. And you know, if each of you, I know we're over time, but if each of you want to just like leave us with one thought, happy to do that. And if anybody needs to drop off, I know you do, but we'll have a recording also. I just think it'd be nice to give you the opportunity to have one last word for us to go out on.
There is a flourishing of the issue of mental health. Is becoming more and more relevant. I want to leave you with one thought, which is the following. To fight stigma is not enough. We demand dignity.
Thank you.
I would invite every single man to look for a men's group, a community of men to, if it's not something that you've done before, experiment. Put yourself out there on a limb. You'd be very, very surprised at what can come up.
There's a situation in the Bible, and God shows up and asks one brother to another brother, where is your brother? And the other brother says, am I my brother's keeper? And I'm here to respond from antiquity to now. Yes, I am my brother's keeper.
Amen.
Amen.
Love it. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who joined us as well and commented and asked questions and took time out of your night to be here. I hope you'll share this with other men in your lives as well. And we'll have the recording available. We'll send it out to everybody who registered. It will be on our website. And, you know, shameless plug here, but we do at MHA have a podcast as well. My co-host is on this right now, Dustin. It's called Surfacing the Meaning and the Story. And it really is it's a powerful way for us to have conversations with people about their experiences with mental health. In fact, we have some people on this call right now who have been guests on that, several. So check that out as well and share that. And thank you again for joining us. I hope you'll come for another community conversation the next time.